One of the most difficult episodes, hard to understand episodes in our weekly Parsha is the struggle between Yakov and an angel. And there are various interpretations offered, of course, and in fact some of our sages thought that the whole thing happened in a vision, meaning it was in his sleep that he saw this. One might wonder, so why was his thigh not functioning well? Why was his what exactly would be the result if it's only in his dream that he saw that the angel is touching his thigh and he became lame? Why would it happen physically? Because clearly even later when he was walking, he was not walking straight, right? Tzolea al Yericho, the Torah says. So on that there are various explanations. First of all, when somebody very strongly perceives something, it sometimes does have physical implications too. So it could be that he actually did wake up lame after this episode. And also another possibility is that while he was sleeping, he was tossing and turning, and he, in fact, when he perceived this in his vision, he, in fact, it didn't have an effect on his leg as well physically. He somehow got stuck a little bit, and after he woke up, he couldn't walk straight for a while. By the way, there are different interpretations. What exactly does that hint to? This fact that the angel touched his leg specifically, his thigh. So one of the explanations is the thigh is the children. Usually the Torah uses euphemisms when it discusses the children. For instance, later when the Torah describes the family of Yaakov, it says Yetzei Yericho, those that came out from his thigh, literally. Thigh is a euphemism. So could be that the thigh here is the children, the lower part of the body, kind of associates with what comes out of a person. So this idea that throughout history, a lot of times, the righteous people, the righteous generations lost their children because of the bad education, because of various currents, this constant problem between what's called avot ubanim, children and parents. Maybe this is the hint in the last prophet in Malachi at the very end, that one of the things Eliyahu will do when he comes back at the end of days, when Mashiach will come, he will turn the hearts of children to their parents and parents to their children. The difficulties between the generation gap. Whatever the case may be, with regards to the actual story of Yaakov, right, whether it happened in a dream, whether it happened physically, the question is, what does it hint to? So the most common explanation is that he was struggling against the angel that represented the spiritual part of Esav, in a sense, right? Before he actually met Esav physically, he had to conquer whatever represented him spiritually. That this was the angel of Esav. But there are all kinds of other explanations. And one interesting explanation that I used to think that there is some ancient source for it, but I'm not sure anymore that such an ancient source exists. But on the internet I found, when I was searching for it, that this is a modern psychological explanation. I think there could be some ancient source for it too. I must say here that the whole idea of angel is a lot of times it's obscure, it's very blurry. For example, in mathematics we have such a thing as vectors. So vectors don't actually exist. It's just used as a tool to prove something. A less known fact is that centers of mass are used sometimes for geometric problems. Of course, the Descartes' axis, right? The system of that Descartes invented, René Descartes, is also used in geometry a lot, and that also doesn't actually physically exist. It's just used in order to prove something. So one might say that a lot of times the angels also doesn't really mean that there is a specific being in this particular context. It could be that it's just a kind of usage of a tool to explain the actions that Hashem does through His ways. Whatever the case may be, with regards to the soul and this relationship, like a soul basically when it's outside the body, it's very similar to an angel. It's somewhat angelic. And there are cases when there is some blurry, the difference is kind of blurred between the two. One example is it's known that some great mystics in our history had what was called a Maggid, a kind of angel that used to tell them certain things. They would ask an angel, and probably in meditational state, they would ask an angel and get certain answers. A number of the sages, at least it's claimed, again, there's no obviously there's no objective proof that they did have a Maggid, but at least there are things stated in the name of Maggid. So one of the explanations, by the way, there's even a book that's attributed to Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of Shulchan Aruch, that supposedly he had a Maggid. All kinds of things there that this angel is telling him. Called Maggid Mesharim, an interesting book. All kinds of advice is given, and many interesting ideas. So, among other things, the explanation of this Maggid, among other explanations, is that it's the soul of the person himself. There is such an explanation, that it's not really an angel, meaning a separate angel. It's just the person's soul is, in fact, in a certain sense, an angel. Right? And the soul, when a person has this kind of contact with his high levels of soul, this is called that the Maggid is telling him things. His own soul is basically telling him things. There is such an explanation among certain mystics. Similarly, with regards to Yetzer Hara, the bad inclination, what's called, sometimes it's perceived as a kind of angel outside. Really, there are two aspects of it. Outside evil inclination and inside. What's inside of us, what tells us to do wrong. But at any rate, you could perceive it at least. I mean, psychology also uses this tool. Modern psychology also uses this tool of splitting kind of the personality and saying, well, there's the ego and whatever. So you could say that the Yetzer Hara is a kind of angel, in this case, a sort of angel that causes a person to do bad, the evil inclination, right? Whatever the case may be, the angel that Yaakov struggled against, it's not far-fetched to say that it's actually his own part of his own personality in a certain sense. Maybe Yaakov the way he was and Yaakov the way he became now, right? Two different Yaakovs in a certain sense, and that's why there was a new name given to him. Now there is also Yisrael, right? A different type of person. The spiritual equivalent of Yakov and Yisrael, just like Leah and Rachel, are two different hanhagas, two different ways that Hashem rules over us. For instance, Leah is the hanhaga of Hashem when everything is great, the great power of Hashem revealed in a certain sense, whereas Rachel is associated with our exile, when the Jewish people are downtrodden, and Rachel is crying for her children, it says. So this is a different type of hanhaga, a more hidden hanhaga, when Hashem does maybe miracles that are not open miracles, things like that. And the same way, Israel and Yaakov, right? In Kabbalah, in the writings of Arizal, he explains the various Partzufim, the various ways of Hashem's rule over the world, that Israel is Keneged Leah, is the higher level, and Yaakov is the lower level, when Yaakov had to, a lot of times, do all kinds of manipulations in order to survive. So this is the times when we're in exile. Of course, when the Jewish people were in exile, it was a question of survival a lot of times. The lying, for instance, that had to be done. Rabbi Weissmandl, during World War II, created a whole fictional character that supposedly represented the whole Jewry. And the representative of the Nazis, of the SS in Slovakia, believed it. So Rabbi Weissmandl forged all kinds of letters and would give bribes and do all kinds of things that normally one shouldn't be doing, but here it was a question of saving people, and he was able to save a lot of people. So the idea of Yaakov is the idea of Ekev, right? It's exactly like Esav said. It's not for nothing that he's called Yaakov. He kind of outsmarted me already, or whatever. He basically tricked me a couple of times already. So this is the situation, unfortunately, when we're in exile, or at least until recently. Now the situation is very different. We're so accustomed that the Jews have full rights in places like America, but it wasn't always like that. It wasn't like that at all, most of our exile. And the only way to survive was through trickery, through bribery, exactly the types of things that Yaakov had to do with Esav in this particular parsha. It says that our sages saw in this how to deal with Romans. A lot of the things that Yaakov did became model of our behavior when we're being ruled by others and when we're in exile. Whatever the case may be, I think this idea that Yaakov was struggling against himself, the two types of Yaakov, is not a far-fetched idea, and it may in fact have even some sources in the ancient writings of our sages. And if you like this video, please press like. I know some of the things was quite obscure, and I kind of tried to touch on a lot of topics, which each of them would need a lengthy explanation, but I just kind of summarized and brought a lot of ideas. Ten lechacham ve'chachemod. It says, give a wise person and he'll become even wiser. So I threw in some ideas, but there's much more to discuss, each of them, of course. And please subscribe to our channel.